So, the one thing that kind of came out in the last week or so, and I think is really kind of has some really neat implications across the board, is the fact that there's now a workable helicopter inside Microsoft Flight Simulator. So, FlyInside, which is guys that focus a lot on helicopters, have actually released the Bell 47G2, um, which is a pretty kind of bare bones helicopter, piston powered helicopter. That works in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's just funny, kind of, I'm just staring at this image, and it's just funny to stare at this huge canopy bubble and not see a person trying to fly this helicopter. It's just magically suspended there. um, yeah, so FlyInside has created the first helicopter that works inside Microsoft Flight Simulator. If you buy this helicopter, you can fly it inside Microsoft Flight Simulator, and you can. Then I think again, this is going to be a great sim, not just for GA, but for helicopters especially, because you can get up close to all these buildings and see the detail level that is there, more so than you can in a fixed-wing aircraft. You can really kind of get close and hover near a building and really see how beautiful some of these buildings are. But they did conquer it. They did conquer Microsoft Flight Simulator, and it's not a hack. It says it's not a hack. What they've done is they've basically created a model that with an external flight model. So they don't use the flight model in Microsoft Flight Simulator at all. They built their own separate model outside of Microsoft Flight Simulator. So when you load the airplane, it flies through that world, but all the dynamics of how the aircraft handles, how the helicopter handles, are handled by this outside external program. So apparently it is quite realistic. I don't know because I don't fly helicopters, but they list all the different features. Ground effect, flatback, transverse flow, torque, yaw, VRS, auto rotation, etc. All these things you can do in this helicopter. You can experience them in this helicopter. So it's really neat. I think to me it's a really neat idea. I'm not a huge helicopter person, and I think I'm getting too old to probably learn how to really properly fly a helicopter. But nevertheless, the fact that they could do this, the fact that you can create a very realistic aircraft by having an external flight model outside of the simulator, opens up a whole bunch of doors for what's going to happen in the future in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This was probably one of the biggest things that brought in a lot of high-end simulations into the FSX and P3D world, where airplanes that were created with completely external flight models. So the two that come to mind, I think PMDG creates somewhat external flight models for their aircraft, but the one that really comes to mind was the Dash 8. The Majestic Dash 8 was created with a completely external flight model, so they didn't depend at all upon the flight model built into Microsoft, or built into P3D. Their airplane operates completely external to P3D. They display the world, and the airplane flies through that world, but everything that determines how the airplane flies and how it interacts with the world in terms of winds and engine thrust and lift and everything is all handled through their own external program, so that they could tweak the flight model to make it very realistic for the Dash 8, because previous iterations of the simulators have not had great flight models by default. So using those internal built-in flight models often does not work out particularly well, especially for anything that's sort of outside of what the model was designed for. So those models were usually designed for general aviation aircraft. Even trying to fly jets in them has not always been great, but and certainly helicopters, a completely different flight model than a fixed-wing airplane. So if the sim is not designed to support it, then you really have to create your own flight model. So that's exactly what these guys did, and I'm glad to see that it did come to it. I just look at this picture here, just to watch this helicopter fly through this whole space here. It just looks absolutely fantastic. I wonder if they have more screenshots. There we go. Yeah, we got more screenshots. A very bare bones helicopter, but with a very bare bones radio stack. But at the end of the day, when you fly in a helicopter, especially, it's really about looking out the window and seeing the world out there. So it's probably not something that I'm going to personally be interested in. Please run FlyInside Heli Manager. But definitely just from the perspective of things that are now the sim can do now, things that you can do with the sim that people have proven that you can do. I think it's great. So hopefully this kind of opens up the door to what else can happen in the future. Getting other developers to build their aircraft with dynamics that exist outside of the simulator, proving that it can be done outside of the simulator, so that you can get a more realistic, more realistic flight model. Majestic, I'm looking in your direction. I want that Dash 8 in Microsoft Flight Simulator so badly. I think it's going to be, a huge airplane if you guys can get it in there. I know it's a lot of work, but I believe the market will support you when it comes down to it. So, anyways, I thought that was really neat that someone has finally brought a helicopter to Microsoft Flight Simulator. And not too bad. It's been 9 months since the sim came out. It hasn't even been the full year yet, and they managed to figure out how to get this in there. So, I thought that was really interesting news, and I think that's really bodes well for the future for Microsoft Flight Simulator. It just goes to show, like, developers are just starting to scratch the surface of what this sim is going to be capable of, and especially with Asobo very much in an active development process, they're going to continue to be a very developers are going to continue to discover more and more of what the sim can do, and tweak more and more and pull more and more capability out of it. And it's something that we expect out of all of our sims, really. I mean, you look at what airport scenery, pay-aware airport scenery in P3D looks like now, scenery that's been released in the last year or two versus scenery that was released 4 or 5 years ago for P3D, and it's just worlds better, with the PBR textures and even higher quality textures. All these things kind of combined. Even just over the life of the P3D product, it was amazing how much more detail could be squeaked out of P3D in the last year or so, in the last couple of years versus the first couple of years when the P3D product really hit the platform. So people have really kind of tweaked, pushed, poked, prodded all the different parts of the SDK to see what it's capable of, what the sim is capable of. And the Microsoft Flight Simulator is just getting started. That's easily going to be the sim for the next 10 years. Not the only sim, but definitely it's going to be a sim for the next 10 years, and the developers are just going to make it better and better over time, for sure.